Good morning, everyone. In this video, we are going to discuss about development of newspapers, a global scenario. So we are just going to discuss about how newspaper evolved globally. Okay, so we'll start with the handwritten era. The earliest means of sending messages was through sounds and words. News was conveyed from one person to another through word of mouth. Kings and nobles spread news through messengers and through proclamations which were read out in public places. So, if you watch, even in Malayalam movies, if you watch the old movies like Parshi Raja and all, you can see that, the messengers of these kings and noble persons, they just come, they just go to the, public places and they just read out, the king's message in the public places. Town criers, another concept of that time. Okay, town criers made announcements of local interest. Like usually for local people, if they wanted to communicate something to the local people, they used to they just go to the public place and they just not reading out, basically just crying out. That's why the name became town criers. Okay, and in India, in ancient India, news was given in inscriptions on walls of temples and copper plates and writings on rocks and all, basically. And in later era, historical evidence shows the ruler made his will known to the people through this kinds of proclamation. I told you, you can see that this similar pattern everywhere, like throughout. If you take any country, you can see that the earlier communication to the public, that is like news dissemination to the public via this kind of they use somebody called a town crier, or they kind of inscripted these things on a wall, or a wall of a temples, where you can see people group of people gather for something. And in the Mughal period in India, news writers were appointed to various administrative units in their territory. They are charged with the function of sending reports to the headquarters of the administration. So, even they also practiced something called this reporting kind of a thing. They had reporters everywhere and messengers everywhere, and they used to collect information from different part of the country, and and that was communicated to the administration. That is what you call kind of a news just today. And in Europe, you can see that even before the birth of Christ, the Romans posted news sheets called acta diurna. Acta diurna means daily acts, or government announcement bulletins, around 59 BC as ordered by Julius Caesar. And they were carved in wood or stone and posted in public places. I told you, you can see these are all like similar patterns. Most of these countries followed similar patterns. Okay, so those in Europe you can call it's like Acta Diurna. And Acta Diurna is the first predecessor to common newspaper. So you can this particular Acta Diurna is closely associated with what you call the newspaper today. And in China, you can see that the government produced news sheets called Tipao. So these were commonly used among the court officials during the late Han Dynasty. And you can see that all these, periods, so the first news sheets were called Tipao, then the second one was Peking Gazette. And Peking Gazette, again, I told you it was a publication from the government. And also, it was pretty it was printed and circulated all over the China. It was pretty popular there in China. And again in Europe, after printing had come to Europe in the 16th century, the Venetian government produced a small handwritten news sheets called notice scripts. Okay, so we already mentioned about Acta Diurna of Rome. Then later you can see that in 16th century they published something called notice scripts. Okay, that means written notices. Okay, and So earlier you can see that basically in this handwritten era in India and all, so that was part of the government or the kingdom. So they used to just disseminate information with the help of messengers and all, and that was of course free of cost. And then when they introduced this thing called notice credit, they had to pay. Um, they had to pay something called a geseta, that is a Venetian coin, for the subscription of the newspaper. So this particular newspaper, so something called subscription charges, actually they um, kind of introduced for this particular newspaper. And then comes the printed era, okay. And the history of journalism is closely linked to the development of printing press and the growth of communications. And the credit for establishing a printing press, a movable metal types, that goes to Gutenberg of Germany in 1458. We have already discussed about Gutenberg and his printing press in the previous sessions, and also I don't have to tell you all those things. So you are familiar with Gutenberg, I know that, okay. And now let us familiarize with some of the important newspapers, of that era, okay. And early newspaper that later became an integral part of the history of newspapers. The first one is Relation. Relation is from Germany. First printed weekly publication, again started by Johann Carlos. First issue released by 1605. So this is just a copy of the Relation. I got it from the net. Then Avisa Relation Order Settung, again a German newspaper, and you can see that most of this newspaper, like early things, you can see that they were from Germany. I mean, basically from Europe, and printed by Lucas, and probably started in Wolfenbüttel, Germany. Then Gazette de France, that was a French newspaper, first weekly in France, founded by Renaud and started on May 30th, 1631, and entered in 1915. And next is Public Occurrences. This is a pretty famous newspaper, especially America. First ever American newspaper, printed in Boston in 1690 by Richard Pierce and edited by Benjamin Harris. And they are non-names in the history of, especially when you take the global scenario, they are non-names in the development of especially newspapers and all. Okay, the newspaper angered officials and it was promptly shut down. Only one issue is ever was published. It has only 2 pages. And Daily Current is a English newspaper, first successful English language daily, published by Elizabeth Mallet on 11th March 1702 at Fleet Bridge in London. Again, an English daily from UK, single page newspaper with 2 columns, meant to cover foreign news, advertisements on the reverse side of the newspaper, entered in 1735. Boston newsletter, another important newsletter. Okay, first continuously published newspaper in British North America. So just imagine, this was like most of the earlier newspapers. You can see that they were weekly or monthly, and they had to stop in between and all. But Boston newsletter, you can see that the first continuously published newspaper, and founded by John Campbell, very important personality. Yes, in April 24th, 1704. It had a limited circulation, but heavily subsidized by Britain. And early publication, if you take, these are early publication, these were the early publication which shaped the development of what would today be recognized as the newspaper. And some publications also appeared as pamphlets and small booklets, often containing woodcut illustrations. Then the literacy rates were low, so, and the news publications were often read aloud in public, and literacy and oral culture existed side by side during this period. And that, most of these, especially during that time, literacy was very low, not like today. So people, buying a newspaper, if you don't read, then there is no point in buying a newspaper, right? So what happened, like, they had this concept called, reading out a newspaper, like, one person will subscribe, especially like, they had this library kind of a concept then, especially you call this club and all, no, here. So they had that kind of a concept then, and they used to, like, one person, the literate person, they used to read out for the others, and the others used to listen. Okay, so that was actually a thing developed during uh, especially this period, our oral culture. Okay, and by the 18th century, England was flooded with newspaper reading rooms. Okay, you can call it newspaper reading room. Okay, it's like, our club setup here, no, especially like, yeah, something like that. Okay, and penny press, that is one of the important things, especially, to be mentioned, especially in the history of journalism. I mean, history of development of newspapers. So I told you earlier, the newspaper. I mean, the literacy rate was very low. So this emergence of penny press, a concept like these were the newspapers in tabloid format and sold at lowest price, and just a penny per paper, that is like, very very small amount, and it became popular with the American public. And so the penny papers represented the crudest form of journalism, because of the sensational gossip they reported. Okay, so to attract the people, they published very kind of, sensationalized gossips they reported. And a pioneer during the penny press era was Benjamin H. Day, founder of the New York Sun, and the Sun was the first popular penny press. We have already discussed about the Sun, in our previous session, right? Yes. So penny press is basically like, you are promoting a newspaper. So like, people want to read this, especially when you have this exaggerated kind of news, and even today also you have this, kind of, you can say that it's yellow journalism. Okay, they kind of, spread the news kind of. Um, News, especially like gossips and celebrity news about the kings, and all those stuff. So what, like, people would be interested in such kind of things. So obviously and the price also they reduced. That was just 1 penny, because newspaper was very expensive at that time, and they just made it 1 penny. So you can say that this penny press brought a kind of, revolution, in the especially in the development of newspaper. Okay, so people started buying newspaper because you get it for just a penny. So everybody started buying newspaper, and everybody started reading newspapers, just to get to know about these kinds of gossip and scandals and all. Okay, another important personality, so we have already discussed about Joseph Pulitzer, because in the last session like we just discussed about a few newspapers, world newspaper, those who got Pulitzer prizes, and also hope you remember the name. Okay, so Joseph Pulitzer was one of the leading American editors who entered into media business with the publication of the St. Louis Post Dispatch in 1878. So Pulitzer bought the New York World in 1883 and made it into America's largest circulated paper. And Pulitzer introduced the techniques of sensationalism to the newspaper he acquired. So what he did was, like, he kind of, um, uh, introduced something called yellow journalism. I told you, like, people were very fond of, now also they are fond of this kind of, this yellow stuff, what you call the, Manyapadram in Malayalam, okay, in courts. So that, like, people are so fond of, these kinds of news. Even you love to read about celebrity, you love to read about sports personality, and you love to read about politicians, and all these masala stories related to them. So obviously this guy, realized the news value, or the probably like the business thing in that particular, especially it's a business, right? Obviously it's a business, so he identified that business value of such news, and he started disseminating such kind of news. So what happened, like, obviously the popularity of the newspaper increased. Okay, and Pulitzer names remain popular today because it is associated with the most prestigious award in American journalism, that is Pulitzer Prize. Okay, in 1917, Columbia School of Journalism organized awards of the Pulitzer Prize for excellence in journalism. So that's all about the global scenario of the development of a newspaper. So just go through the slides, and if you have any questions, you can ask me in the live session, or you can ask me in the forum. Okay, so these are all very important. So I didn't go, it wasn't kind of, an in-depth study of the global scenario, because you don't require it. Okay, you just need to know about only, the important newspapers during this time, and how it evolved, and what were the earlier forms of newspaper, all those things, and some, like penny press and Joseph Pulitzer and all. So they were part of this important movement. Okay, especially what I meant is like the development of newspapers. Okay, so that's all. Thank you so much.